The salt air drifted over Charleston Harbor that Saturday afternoon, carrying the sound of church bells across the city. Tourists strolled down cobblestone streets, unaware that inside St. Michael's Church, one of Charleston's oldest sanctuaries, a young woman was living the happiest moment of her life, or what she thought was the happiest moment of her life. Emily Carter, 27 years old, stood at the back of the aisle in a lace gown that shimmered beneath the stained glass windows. The light poured in warm and golden, bathing her in an almost heavenly glow. She clutched a bouquet of white roses and breathed deeply, as though each breath might steady her trembling heart. This was the day she had dreamed of since childhood, her wedding day, the start of forever. Her groom, Tommy Reynolds, 32, waited at the altar. In his tailored black suit, with neatly combed dark hair and a confident smile, he looked every bit the man who had won over not just Emily's heart, but her entire family's. He had built a reputation as a rising star in finance, the kind of man parents wanted for their daughters, steady, dependable, promising. To the crowd of family and friends, Tommy Reynolds was the perfect match. The organ swelled, and Emily's father, Harold Carter, took her arm. His eyes glistened with pride and fear all at once. He leaned down and whispered, just loud enough for Emily to hear, "You take care of my little girl, Tommy. She deserves the world." Tommy smiled back, his jaw tightening for a fraction of a second before he answered smoothly, "She'll always have it." To everyone else, it sounded like a promise. To Emily, it felt like security. But promises can be dangerous when they're built on lies. The ceremony unfolded with all the pageantry a Southern wedding demands. Vows were exchanged, rings slipped onto trembling fingers. For better or for worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. Guests dabbed at their eyes as Emily and Tommy kissed beneath the vaulted ceiling. A wave of applause filled the church. In that moment, no one suspected how cruelly those vows would twist by nightfall. At the reception, held in a ballroom overlooking the Cooper River, chandeliers cast shimmering light on polished wood floors. Glasses clinked, laughter echoed, and the air was thick with joy. Emily glided through the crowd, her smile effortless, her hand never far from Tommy's. She introduced him to distant relatives, childhood friends, and co-workers who marveled at how radiant she looked. "She's glowing," one bridesmaid whispered, "like a woman who finally has everything she wanted." Tommy played the role of devoted husband perfectly. He held Emily's chair, poured her champagne, and whispered into her ear as though they were sharing private jokes. To the outside world, they were the picture of love. But even perfect pictures can hide shadows. The first dance began. A hush fell over the room as the couple stepped onto the dance floor. Emily's gown swept across the polished wood as Tommy drew her close. The music, soft, slow, timeless, wrapped around them. Emily rested her head against his chest, unaware of the storm waiting on the horizon. In the glow of the chandeliers, her eyes closed, and she whispered, "This feels like a dream." Tommy kissed the top of her head, smiling for the cameras, and replied, "It's only the beginning." But the beginning of what? As the night stretched on, the reception turned into a whirlwind of dancing, toasts, and celebration. Emily's maid of honor stood with a trembling glass, voice cracking as she said, "I've never seen Emily this happy. Tommy, thank you for giving her the love she always deserved." Cheers erupted, the clinking of glasses ringing like bells of approval. In that ballroom, joy seemed infinite. Emily's mother leaned across the table to whisper to a friend, "He's such a good man. I can finally sleep at night knowing she's safe." Safe. It was the word everyone repeated. Safe in his arms. Safe in this marriage. Safe in the future they all believed lay ahead. No one saw the way Tommy's smile faltered when he thought no one was looking. No one noticed the moment his phone buzzed in his pocket, or the flash of irritation across his face before he quickly tucked it away. No one wondered why his eyes seemed to linger on the shadows just beyond the ballroom windows, as though he feared something, or someone, might be watching. By midnight, as the last guests trickled out and the band packed up their instruments, Emily and Tommy slipped away to their suite overlooking the river. The room was filled with roses, champagne on ice, and the promise of new beginnings. Emily kicked off her heels and laughed, collapsing onto the bed in exhaustion and bliss. Tommy joined her, wrapping his arms around her as they whispered about the future. If anyone had peeked through that door, they would have seen nothing but a young couple, deeply in love, starting a life together. But behind Tommy's smile, behind Emily's glowing joy, there was a secret pulsing in the dark, a secret about to rise to the surface and shatter everything. By the next sunrise, Charleston would wake not to headlines of a fairy tale wedding, but to the horror of a bride beaten to death in her wedding gown. The suite at the Harborview Hotel was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioner and the faint lap of water against the pier outside. Emily slipped out of her gown, laughing softly as she tried to free herself from layers of lace and satin. She looked at Tommy, her new husband, with eyes full of trust. "Can you believe it? We're finally here," she whispered, her voice still trembling with excitement. Tommy smiled faintly, loosening his tie. "Yeah, just the two of us. No more crowds, no more speeches." He poured champagne into 2 flutes and handed her one. They clinked glasses, and for a moment it seemed as though the magic of the night would carry them through until morning. But then Emily's phone buzzed on the nightstand. At first, she ignored it. Who would text her this late? Probably a bridesmaid posting pictures or her mother checking in. But the phone buzzed again, then again, insistently, until curiosity got the better of her. Emily reached over, unlocked the screen, and froze. On the display were photographs, grainy, intimate photographs. Her new husband, Tommy, with another man. The images were unmistakable. Tommy's arm draped over a man's shoulders. Tommy kissing him in the corner of a dimly lit bar. Tommy holding him with the tenderness of a lover. Emily's heart slammed against her chest. She scrolled further, screenshots of messages, affectionate words exchanged over months, maybe years. Promises. Lies. All of it staring back at her on her wedding night. Her breath caught in her throat. "Oh my God." Tommy, noticing the color drain from her face, asked casually, "What is it?" "More pictures from the bridesmaids." She turned the phone toward him, her hand shaking. "Who is this, Tommy?" Her voice cracked, half disbelief, half rage. "Don't you dare tell me this is nothing. Who is this man?" Tommy's face hardened. He set his glass down slowly, like a man calculating his next move. "Emily, listen. That's old. It's nothing now. Somebody's trying to ruin this night for us." Emily rose to her feet, her gown slipping from the chair onto the floor. Her eyes flashed with a mixture of betrayal and fear. "Old. These messages are from last week. Don't lie to me on the night I gave you my vows." Tommy's jaw tightened. "You don't understand. It's complicated." Her voice rose, shaking. "Complicated? You stood in front of my parents, in front of God, and promised me forever. And the whole time, you've been living another life. You used me." The room seemed to shrink around them, the champagne, the roses, the glow of the city outside, all of it turning cold. Tommy took a step toward her, hands raised as though to calm her. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I wanted this. I wanted us. But things, they're not that simple." Emily backed away, her hands trembling. "Not that simple? Do you know how humiliating this is? My family, my friends, everyone I love, they think I just married the perfect man. And you." She broke off, her voice splintering into sobs. "You've been lying since the day we met." For a moment, silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. Tommy's chest rose and fell rapidly, his eyes darting toward the door as though he feared someone might hear. Then Emily said the words that broke the fragile mask still clinging to the night. "I'm leaving. Right now. I will not be your cover-up. I won't live in your lie." Tommy's hand shot out, grabbing her arm. His grip was tight, desperate. "No, you're not walking out on me. Not tonight." Emily yanked her arm free, glaring at him through tears. "Watch me." Her voice was sharp, slicing through the room like glass shattering. She reached for her purse on the dresser, fumbling for her keys and phone. Behind her, Tommy's expression shifted, panic mixing with fury. The mask of the charming groom, the attentive husband, was slipping away. "You think you can just leave?" he hissed, his voice low, dangerous. "You think you can tell everyone? You'll ruin everything." Emily spun to face him, her chest heaving. "You already ruined everything, Tommy. You ruined me. You ruined this marriage before it even began." The air was heavy, suffocating, as though the walls themselves were closing in. Outside, the river glistened under moonlight, silent and indifferent. Inside, the first cracks in Emily's dream had split wide open. Her heart still pounded with shock, her mind spinning. She had come into this night as a bride. But now, only hours after saying, "I do," she realized she was nothing more than a pawn in a dangerous double life. And Tommy Reynolds was not the man she thought he was. He was a stranger and a liar. What Emily didn't know was that this discovery was not just the end of her marriage. It was the beginning of the end of her life. The hotel suite felt colder now, as if the air itself had turned hostile. Emily's hands trembled while she scrolled further through the text messages and photographs. Each swipe revealed more evidence. Receipts for hotel rooms in Atlanta, flight confirmations, messages laced with intimacy. "Miss you already. Can't wait for our next weekend together." These weren't relics of a past fling. They were the fingerprints of a life lived in parallel, a life hidden from her. Her stomach twisted. The champagne and cake from hours earlier threatened to rise in her throat. She turned the phone screen toward Tommy again, her voice breaking but still sharp. "You told me you loved me, that I was your future. And yet here it is, proof that I was nothing but a cover for you." Tommy's face shifted, the carefully rehearsed smile he wore at the reception gone. He no longer looked like the charming groom who had twirled her around the dance floor. Instead, his expression was dark, tense, as though a mask had finally fallen. "I do love you," he snapped, his voice harsh and defensive. "But you don't get it, Emily. You don't know what I've been dealing with. My job, my family, the pressure. They wouldn't understand. You wouldn't understand." Her eyes widened, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Don't you dare put this on me. Don't you dare make me the reason for your lies. You had a choice. You could have been honest. Instead, you chose deceit. You married me knowing I was walking into a lie." Tommy's jaw clenched. He paced across the room, running a hand through his hair. "I had to marry you, Emily. I needed this. People expect me to have the perfect wife, the perfect life. Do you know what would happen if everyone knew the truth? My career would be over. My family would disown me." Emily let out a sharp laugh, bitter, broken. "So you used me as your shield, your prop, the smiling bride to stand by your side while you kept sneaking off to him." Her voice dropped, her words trembling with fury. "I was never your wife. I was your alibi." The words landed like a slap, and for the first time, Tommy's composure cracked completely. He slammed his fist onto the dresser, making the champagne flutes rattle. "Stop saying that. You think it's that simple? You think I don't care about you? I married you, didn't I?" Emily flinched at the sound, her breath coming in shallow bursts. She gathered the scattered printouts from her phone, holding them tight as though the paper could protect her. "You didn't marry me out of love. You married me out of fear. And now I'm the one paying the price." Her words struck a nerve. Tommy's face twisted with anger, but beneath it, fear lingered. Fear of exposure. Fear of losing the double life he had so carefully balanced. Emily's voice steadied, though her heart raced. "I won't be a part of this lie. I'll call my parents right now. I'll tell them everything. I'll tell everyone what you really are." The silence that followed was heavy. Tommy's eyes locked onto hers, and for a brief moment, there was something almost pleading in them. But it vanished quickly, replaced by something darker. "You can't," he said quietly, his tone low and dangerous. "You don't know what you're saying." Emily squared her shoulders, despite the tremor in her hands. "I know exactly what I'm saying. I will not live in this cage you built for me. I'd rather walk away now than waste one more second in your lie." Tommy moved toward her, his steps deliberate. Emily backed away until her shoulders pressed against the wall. Her phone buzzed again in her hand. Another message, another reminder of the truth she had uncovered. She glanced down and saw a name she didn't recognize, Derek. A photo flashed across the screen, timestamped just days before the wedding. Tommy in a hotel room, laughing, his arm around Derek's waist. Emily's eyes widened. It wasn't just one man. Tommy froze, his face paling for the first time that night. Emily's voice cracked, barely more than a whisper. "You've been with more than one. How many, Tommy? How many lies have you told? How many lives have you lived?" Her words echoed in the room, and with them came the crushing weight of betrayal. Emily wasn't just a bride who had been deceived. She was a woman who had been stripped of her dignity in the cruelest way possible, on the very night she believed her future had begun. She clutched the phone, her fingers trembling, and whispered, almost to herself, "I don't even know who you are." Tommy stepped closer, his voice low and desperate. "You're not thinking clearly. We can get through this. No one has to know. We can start fresh tomorrow. Just forget what you saw. Emily looked at him, her eyes blazing through her tears. Forget? How do you forget that the man you just married is a stranger? How do you forget the lies, the betrayal, the humiliation? No, Tommy. I won't forget. I won't forgive. The words hung heavy between them, sealing a line that could never be crossed again. Emily turned, moving toward the door, her hand reaching for the handle. But Tommy's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist, pulling her back with a force that made her stumble. You're not leaving, he growled, his face inches from hers. Not tonight. Emily's heart pounded in her chest, her breath coming fast. She looked into his eyes and realized something terrifying. She wasn't standing across from her husband. She was staring into the face of a man cornered, a man whose lies were collapsing around him, a man who might do anything to keep them buried. For Emily, the dream had ended. What remained was a nightmare from which she might never wake. The room no longer felt like a bridal suite. The roses, the champagne, the lace gown puddled on the carpet. All of it had transformed into mocking props in a cruel theater. Emily's chest heaved as she stared at the man she had married only hours ago, his hand crushing her wrist. His eyes were wild now, stripped of the charming mask he had worn all day. Let me go, she hissed, twisting in his grip. Her voice carried a sharpness she had never used with him before. You don't own me. Tommy's lips curled. You think you can walk out that door and destroy me? After everything I've worked for? After the image I've built? Emily yanked free, staggering back toward the bed. She clutched the phone against her chest like a shield. Destroy you? You destroyed yourself. You lied to me. You lied to everyone. I will not be complicit in your lies. Not now, not ever. Her words echoed through the room, each syllable like a hammer breaking through the silence. Tommy's face darkened. He wasn't pleading anymore. He was cornered, and a cornered man was dangerous. Emily tried again for the door. She reached for the handle, fingers trembling, when Tommy lunged. His hand slammed against the wood above her head, trapping her between him and the exit. She could smell the alcohol on his breath, see the fury tightening every line of his face. You can't leave me, he growled, his voice guttural. Do you hear me? You can't. Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she refused to look away. Watch me. She shoved him back with every ounce of strength she had. For a second, it worked. Tommy stumbled, caught off guard. Emily bolted for the dresser, grabbing her purse and clutching the phone tighter. Her plan was clear. Run, call her parents, and expose him for what he truly was. But Tommy's fury ignited like a match to gasoline. He lunged again, this time with brute force. His hand struck the phone from her grip, sending it skittering across the floor. Before Emily could reach it, his palm collided with her cheek. The sound cracked through the room. She gasped, reeling from the sting, her hand flying to her face. You hit me, she whispered, disbelieving, her voice small and broken. Tommy stood over her, chest heaving. You made me, he spat. Tears streamed down Emily's cheeks. She backed toward the nightstand, her trembling fingers brushing against the cold glass of a champagne bottle. Without thinking, she grabbed it and swung. The bottle shattered against the wall inches from his head, sending shards across the carpet. Stay away from me, she screamed. But her defiance only fueled him. Tommy's rage had swallowed him whole. He lunged, pinning her against the bed. Emily fought wildly, scratching, kicking, biting, but he was stronger. Each time she tried to break free, his fists came down harder. Outside in the hallway, a couple returning from the bar paused. They heard a muffled crash, then a cry that didn't sound like laughter. They exchanged a glance, unsettled, before hurrying away. Inside, Emily's voice broke through the chaos. Please, Tommy, stop. You don't have to do this. You don't have to end it like this. Her words might have pierced another man, but Tommy was no longer listening. Fear and fury had combined into something uncontrollable. His fist struck again and again until Emily's cries grew weaker, then faded into silence. The room was wreckage. Blood stained the lace of her gown where it lay crumpled beneath her. A lamp flickered on the nightstand, its shade dented from the struggle. The bouquet of roses, once radiant, was scattered and trampled across the carpet. Tommy stood over her body, chest heaving, his knuckles raw and smeared with crimson. The reality of what he had done crashed over him like a tidal wave. He staggered back, nearly collapsing onto the chair by the window. His hands shook violently as he looked down at Emily. His bride. his shield, his victim. For a long moment, he sat in silence, staring out at the harbor lights. The city outside slept peacefully, oblivious to the horror that had unfolded within those walls. Then came the pounding on the door. "Hotel security," a voice called. "Is everything all right in there?" Tommy froze, his mind spinning. He glanced toward the door, then back at Emily's lifeless body. His breath came in shallow bursts. There was no undoing it now. The pounding grew louder. "Sir? Ma'am? We need you to open the door." Tommy staggered to his feet, his shirt torn, his face slick with sweat. For one desperate moment, he considered running. Through the window, down the hall, anywhere but here. But his legs wouldn't move. His world had already collapsed. The door burst open. 2 hotel security officers stormed in, their eyes widening at the sight. One rushed to Emily, kneeling by her side, checking for a pulse that wasn't there. The other grabbed Tommy by the arms, forcing him back against the wall. "What the hell happened here?" the officer barked. Tommy's mouth opened, but no words came. He stared at his bloodied hands, his lips trembling. Finally, a broken whisper slipped out. It was supposed to be perfect. The officer snapped handcuffs around his wrists. "You're under arrest." As Tommy was dragged through the doorway, the suite stood as a silent testament to the brutality of the night. Champagne glasses shattered, roses torn, a wedding gown stained in blood. Hours earlier, the room had been filled with laughter and love. Now it was a crime scene. Down in the lobby, guests still lingering from the reception stared in shock as police lights flashed outside. Some gasped, some covered their mouths, others whispered in disbelief. The fairy tale they had toasted to that evening had turned into a nightmare by midnight. And on that warm Charleston night, the news would spread quickly. The bride, Emily Carter, was dead. The wail of sirens split through the Charleston night, echoing off the cobblestone streets and pastel-colored buildings of the historic district. Red and blue lights flickered across the Harborview Hotel, casting long shadows on stunned bystanders who gathered at the entrance. Just hours before, many of these same guests had toasted champagne to celebrate the union of Emily Carter and Thomas Reynolds. Now, they stood whispering, clutching their coats, unable to believe what they were seeing. Inside, the once grand bridal suite had transformed into a crime scene. Detectives stepped carefully across the carpet littered with broken glass and crimson-stained lace. Emily lay still on the floor, her features nearly unrecognizable beneath bruises and blood. The white gown she had worn with such joy earlier that day was torn and soiled, a grotesque reminder of the violence that had shattered the illusion of a fairy tale marriage. Detective Rachel McKinney, a seasoned investigator with the Charleston Police Department, crouched beside Emily's body. Her jaw tightened as she pulled the sheet gently over the young bride's form. She had seen violence before, murders in alleys, shootings in bars, but something about this scene struck her differently. This was supposed to be the safest night of a woman's life, the beginning of her future. Instead, it had ended in brutality. Across the room, officers held Tommy Reynolds against the wall. His tuxedo shirt was torn, his tie hanging limp around his neck. His hands, cuffed tightly, were smeared with blood. His face was pale, eyes darting wildly as though still searching for a way to explain the unexplainable. Officer Daniels read him his rights in a firm, steady voice. Tommy barely seemed to hear. His own words slipped out in a broken murmur. It wasn't supposed to happen. She wasn't supposed to see. Detective McKinney's gaze snapped toward him. "What wasn't she supposed to see, Mr. Reynolds?" Tommy clamped his mouth shut, staring at the floor. But it was too late. The slip had already drawn a line for the detectives to follow. Down in the lobby, Emily's parents arrived in a panic, having been alerted by other family members. Harold Carter, still in his dark wedding suit, pushed past the officers with tears in his eyes. "Where's my daughter? Where's Emily?" A young officer stepped into his path, his face grave. "Sir, I'm sorry. You can't go up there. It's an active crime scene." Emily's mother, Lorraine, let out a wail that pierced through the marble lobby. Guests turned away, unable to meet her eyes. She collapsed into her husband's arms, sobbing. She was supposed to be safe. He promised. He promised us." Harold's face hardened with a mixture of grief and rage. "That man looked me in the eye today. He swore to protect her." His voice cracked. "And he killed her." In the suite, technicians photographed every detail. The shattered champagne bottle against the wall, the the bouquet petals crushed into the carpet, the cracked phone lying just out of reach. Detective McKinney picked it up carefully, scrolling through the last messages Emily had received. Her eyes narrowed at the photographs and intimate texts from another man. "Looks like our groom had secrets," she muttered. She turned to her partner. "Run the name Derek, see what comes up. This isn't just a domestic dispute, it's a double life unraveling." Meanwhile, Tommy was escorted down the hall, flanked by officers. Reporters already gathered outside caught sight of him as he was pushed into the back of a patrol car. Cameras flashed, questions rang out. "Tommy, did you kill your bride? Why did you do it? Was this about another man?" But Tommy kept his head down, silent, his jaw clenched. At the police station, the interrogation room buzzed with tension. The fluorescent lights above cast a harsh glow on Tommy's face. Detective McKinney sat across from him, her voice calm but unyielding. "Tommy, your wife is dead. You were found with her blood on your hands. You can sit there in silence, but the evidence already tells a story. You might as well tell us your version." Tommy's eyes flickered. For a moment, he looked like he might break, but then his defenses returned. "It was an accident. She got upset. She wouldn't stop screaming. I tried to calm her, but she wouldn't stop. I lost control." McKinney leaned forward, her voice sharp. "You didn't lose control. You silenced her. Because she found out the truth about you." She slid the phone across the table, its screen glowing with incriminating texts. "How long were you planning to keep this life hidden? How many lies were you prepared to tell?" Tommy's shoulders slumped, his face buried in his hands. For the first time, his voice cracked. "I just wanted it to be perfect. I wanted them all to believe." Back at the hotel, the coroner's van arrived. Emily's body was carried out on a stretcher, draped in white cloth. Her family stood behind the police tape, Lorraine screaming as Harold held her tight, his face streaked with tears. "That's our baby," he whispered. "That's our baby girl." The sight of the grieving parents left even the officers shaken. Guests who had danced only hours before now watched in stunned silence as the bride's body was driven away under flashing lights. Detective McKinney stood by, her expression hard but her eyes heavy. She turned to her partner and said quietly, "We've seen a lot, but this one's going to haunt this city." By dawn, the headlines were already spreading across South Carolina. Charleston bride beaten to death on wedding night, groom arrested. The fairy tale wedding had become a nightmare etched into the city's memory. For the Carters, it was the day they buried not just their daughter, but every dream they'd ever had for her future. And for Detective Rachel McKinney, it was the beginning of a case that would unravel layers of deceit and betrayal deeper than anyone had imagined. The courthouse in downtown Charleston was packed, its oak-paneled walls echoing with whispers as the trial of Thomas Reynolds began. For weeks, the city had been haunted by the image of Emily Carter's smiling face in her wedding gown, splashed across newspapers and television screens. Now, people crammed into the gallery, eager to see justice done. Families brought coffee in thermoses. Retirees lined up before sunrise. For many, this wasn't just a trial, it was a reckoning. Tommy entered in an orange jumpsuit, shackled at the wrists and ankles. The man who had once stood at the altar with charm and polish now looked hollow, gaunt, and broken. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras clicked as he was led to the defense table. He didn't raise his eyes, but the weight of dozens of stares pressed down on him like a physical force. Across the aisle, Emily's parents sat in the front row. Lorraine clutched a handkerchief, her knuckles white, while Harold leaned forward, his glare fixed on the man who had stolen his daughter's life. The prosecution wasted no time. District Attorney Samuel Hayes rose with calm authority, his southern drawl carrying across the silent courtroom. He painted a vivid picture, a bride full of hope, a secret double life, and a groom who chose violence over truth. He gestured to the wedding photos displayed on the screen. Emily in white lace, her smile radiant, Tommy beside her. Then, the photographs shifted, images of the hotel suite, the shattered champagne bottle, the torn gown, and finally, the autopsy photographs. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Lorraine buried her face in Harold's shoulder, unable to look. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Hayes said, his voice tightening. "This is not just a case of a man losing his temper. This is the story of a calculated liar who built his entire life on deceit. When Emily uncovered the truth, he made a choice. He could confess. He could come clean. He could let her walk away. Instead, he silenced her forever. That is not love. That is murder. The defense countered with desperation. Tommy's attorney, a weary man named Charles Benton, leaned heavily on the podium. He argued that Tommy had snapped under emotional distress, that Emily's discovery and threats to expose him pushed him into a temporary break. He pleaded for the jury to consider manslaughter, not premeditated murder. My client was a man cornered, a man terrified of losing everything. He didn't plan this. He lost control in the heat of passion. But the evidence was relentless. Witnesses were called. The hotel security guard who broke down the door, the guests who heard Emily's screams, the forensic experts who detailed the bruises, fractures, and trauma that left no doubt about the brutality of the attack. Then came Derek, the man from Atlanta. He testified with a trembling voice, admitting he and Tommy had been together for years. He explained how Tommy feared his reputation would crumble if the truth came out, how he had begged Derek to stay silent as the wedding approached. His words left no doubt. Tommy's life was a lie carefully maintained, and Emily had uncovered it. Derek's voice cracked as he continued, his eyes darting between the jury and Tommy, who sat motionless at the defense table. He told me once, Derek whispered, his throat tightening, that Emily was just part of the picture, that she made him look normal, that she was the kind of woman his parents wanted to see by his side. The courtroom fell into stunned silence. Lorraine Carter let out a sharp gasp, clutching Harold's arm so tightly her knuckles turned white. Harold's face burned red. His jaw clenched so hard it looked as though he might shatter his own teeth. Judge Holloway lifted her gavel. Order in the court. But the ripple of shock had already spread. Derek fumbled in his pocket, pulling out a folded piece of paper. These are messages he sent me, days before the wedding. His hand shook as he unfolded it. He wrote, "Don't worry. She'll never know. She's too in love with the idea of us. I'll keep you, and I'll keep her too." Whispers filled the gallery. Some shook their heads, others covered their mouths. D.A. Hayes stepped forward, his voice low but cutting. "Mr. Reynolds, did you or did you not write those words?" Tommy shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his face pale. "They were private. They were never meant." "Answer the question," Hayes snapped. "Yes," Tommy muttered, barely audible. That was the breaking point for Harold Carter. He shot up from his seat, pointing a trembling finger at Tommy. "You used my daughter like she was a damn mask. You took her down that aisle knowing you didn't love her, knowing you'd never honor those vows." His voice thundered across the courtroom. "And then you killed her because she saw through you." Gasps rang out. Lorraine sobbed openly, clinging to her husband's sleeve. Bailiffs hurried to restrain Harold, gently guiding him back into his seat as Judge Holloway struck the gavel. "Order. If there are any more outbursts, I will clear this courtroom." But the damage was already done. The jury had seen not just evidence, but the raw devastation of a father whose daughter had been betrayed and murdered. Derek wiped his eyes, his voice trembling as he finished. "I never wanted this. I never wanted Emily to get hurt. She didn't deserve any of it." He lowered his head. She deserved the truth. The courtroom sat in silence for several long moments, the weight of his words pressing down like a heavy stone. The most devastating testimony came from Detective Rachel McKinney. She described the crime scene in chilling detail, her tone steady but her words heavy. She held up Emily's phone, entered into evidence, and read the last text she had received. Each one was a nail in Tommy's coffin. When Tommy finally took the stand, the courtroom held its breath. His voice cracked as he said, "I loved her. I didn't mean for it to go that far." He described the fight, the accusations, the fear of being exposed. "She said she was going to ruin me. I lost it." D.A. Hayes rose for cross-examination, his eyes sharp. "You didn't lose it, Mr. Reynolds. You chose it. You had every opportunity to let her walk out that door. But you couldn't risk your lies unraveling. Isn't that the truth?" Tommy's silence was louder than any answer. The closing argument sealed it. Hayes' voice rose with righteous anger. Emily Carter was 27 years old. She was a teacher, a daughter, a friend. She had her whole life ahead of her. And on the very night she pledged her future to this man, he took it away. If this isn't first-degree murder, what is? The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. When they returned, the foreman's voice was steady. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Thomas Reynolds, guilty of murder in the first degree." A sob broke from Lorraine's chest as Harold gripped her hand. Tommy bowed his head, his face pale, as the weight of the verdict crashed down. The judge wasted no time. Thomas Reynolds, for the brutal murder of your wife, Emily Carter, you are sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Gasps, whispers, and cries filled the courtroom. Tommy was led away in shackles, no longer the polished groom, no longer the man who promised forever. He was now just another inmate, destined to live out his days in a cell. As the Carters left the courtroom, reporters swarmed, cameras flashing. Harold stopped, his voice steady but full of grief. Justice was served today, but nothing will bring back our Emily. We can only pray no other family has to endure what we've endured. Lorraine, tears streaming, whispered. She was supposed to be safe. Outside, the courthouse steps were lined with people holding candles, strangers moved by Emily's story. They sang softly, their voices carrying into the night. For a moment, Charleston stood still, united in mourning and in outrage. The trial was over. Justice had spoken, but the image that remained was not of the verdict, nor of the man in shackles. It was of Emily, smiling in her wedding dress, walking down the aisle into a future that never came. The courthouse emptied slowly that afternoon, but the echoes of the verdict lingered in every corner of Charleston. People spoke about it in grocery store aisles, whispered about it in church pews, replayed the trial footage on evening news. The name Emily Carter was on everyone's lips, her story etched into the city's collective memory. For Emily's parents, Harold and Lorraine, the verdict brought no comfort. Justice had been delivered, but it felt hollow. That night, they returned to their quiet home on the outskirts of town, where Emily's childhood photographs still lined the mantelpiece. Lorraine touched one frame gently, the image of Emily in her cap and gown on high school graduation day. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "She should have had so many more milestones." Harold, usually a man of few words, broke down for the first time in years. She trusted him, Lorraine. She believed in forever, and he killed her before forever could even begin. His shoulders shook as Lorraine wrapped her arms around him, both parents drowning in a grief that no sentence could erase. In the days that followed, the community rallied. Candlelight vigils glowed outside St. Michael's Church, the same sanctuary where Emily had walked down the aisle in her lace gown. Neighbors left flowers at the steps, some quietly praying, others simply standing in silence. A choir softly sang Amazing Grace as candles flickered in the breeze, each flame a symbol of a life cut short but not forgotten. Reporters came and went, their questions relentless. What would Emily want her legacy to be? Do you feel justice was truly served? Lorraine often declined to speak, tears too heavy for words. But Harold found strength in his grief. Standing before microphones, his voice deep and steady, he said, Emily's life will not be defined by the way she died. It will be remembered by the way she lived, with kindness, with faith, with love. That is the story I want people to tell. Soon, that story began to take shape in action. Friends and family worked with the Carters to create the Emily Carter Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting women caught in dangerous or deceptive relationships. Its mission was simple but powerful, to provide resources, counseling, and shelter for those who feared the person they loved might one day hurt them. Donations poured in from across the state. Survivors reached out, grateful to see Emily's name tied to hope instead of horror. Detective Rachel McKinney attended the foundation's first fundraiser. She stood quietly at the back of the hall, watching as Harold spoke about his daughter's dreams of starting a family, of one day teaching her own children the same lessons she taught her students. Rachel, hardened by years of crime scenes, felt her throat tighten. She deserved so much more, she whispered to herself. In that moment, she vowed Emily's file would never gather dust in the evidence room. It would remain a reminder of why justice mattered. Meanwhile, in Lee Correctional Institution, Tommy Reynolds began his life sentence. Stripped of his suits and his freedom, he spent his days behind bars, just another number in a sea of orange. Fellow inmates whispered about his crime, the groom who killed his bride on their wedding night. Some mocked him, others avoided him, but all of them knew he would never see the outside world again. His once polished image had crumbled to dust, and no mask could protect him now. But outside those prison walls, Emily's name continued to shine. Her former students drew pictures of her in angel wings, leaving them at the steps of their school. Teachers planted a garden in her honor, filled with her favorite flowers, white roses, the same she had carried down the aisle. At Sunday service, pastors spoke about her story as both a warning and a call to action, that secrets, lies, and violence could destroy lives if ignored. Lorraine found comfort in small gestures. One afternoon, a little girl knocked on her door, holding a handmade card. Inside it read, "Mrs. Carter, I miss Miss Emily, but I know she's with God now. She taught me to read, and I'll never forget her." Lorraine clutched the card to her chest, her tears falling freely. But for the first time in months, they weren't only tears of sorrow. Charleston moved forward, but it never forgot. Every anniversary of Emily's death, the community gathered at the church, candles in hand, to honor the young woman whose dream of forever had been stolen. And every year, Harold and Lorraine stood before the crowd, reminding them of her light, her laughter, and her love. Though Emily's story began with a wedding gown and ended with a crime scene, her legacy lived in the lives she touched and the women she would continue to protect through the foundation in her name. Her voice might have been silenced, but her spirit had become louder than ever, a warning, a beacon, and above all, a testament to the truth that love without honesty is not love at all. And as the candles flickered against the night sky, Charleston whispered the same vow over and over. Emily Carter will not be forgotten. In Charleston, time moved on, but the wound left by Emily Carter's death never truly healed. The pastel-colored houses along Rainbow Row, the horse-drawn carriages clattering across cobblestones, the laughter of tourists by the harbor, all of it continued, as if nothing had happened. But for those who had known Emily, for those who had seen her smile light up a classroom or walk down the aisle in a lace gown, life would always be measured in two parts, before the wedding and after. The city remembered her in countless small ways. At St. Michael's Church, a plaque was mounted near the altar where she once said her vows. It read simply, "In loving memory of Emily Carter, whose faith, kindness, and courage live on." Every Sunday, parishioners touched the brass plate gently, a ritual of remembrance. On school mornings, children walked past the rose garden planted in her name, its blossoms swaying gently in the breeze. Some paused to smell the flowers, not fully understanding the tragedy, but sensing the importance of honoring someone who had been taken too soon. For her parents, Harold and Lorraine, grief became a companion rather than an intruder. They learned to live with it, to carry it in silence, though it never grew lighter. Lorraine often found herself talking to Emily in the kitchen while cooking, her voice soft as though her daughter were just in the next room. Harold spent long afternoons tending the roses in their backyard, whispering prayers with every snip of his shears. They had lost their daughter, but they refused to let her story fade into a headline. The Emily Carter Foundation continued to grow. Donations poured in from across the country, some small, some large, each note attached carrying words of gratitude or sorrow. Survivors of abuse wrote letters saying they had found courage to leave dangerous relationships because of Emily's story. Counselors were hired, shelters expanded, and a hotline launched under her name saved lives that might otherwise have been lost. In a way, Emily was still teaching, offering protection, guidance, and hope to women who needed it most. Detective Rachel McKinney often stopped by the Foundation's offices. She rarely stayed long, but she donated quietly and checked in on Harold and Lorraine. The case had marked her, carved into her heart like a scar. "We chase so many monsters," she once confided to a colleague. But the hardest part is when the monster is the person you're supposed to love the most. For Rachel, Emily's case was not just another entry in a file. It was a reminder that justice is not only about punishment. It's about prevention, about standing between the vulnerable and the violent. As for Tommy Reynolds, he lived out his days in Lee Correctional Institution, his name stripped of all respect, his future reduced to the gray walls of a cell. Inmates knew him as the groom who killed his bride, a cautionary tale told in whispers. The man who once tried to control two lives found himself powerless, watched, forgotten, and confined. If he thought of Emily, no one ever knew. The world had stopped listening. But Emily's world, the one she left behind, grew louder with each passing year. On the anniversary of her death, Candlelight vigils lit up Charleston streets. Hundreds gathered, holding photographs of her, reading aloud the names of women who had suffered similar fates. The air filled with hymns and tears, with the sound of a community promising to do better, to protect others where Emily could not be saved. One year, as dusk fell and the candles glowed against the church steps, Lorraine spoke to the crowd. Her voice trembled but carried strength. My daughter believed in love. She believed in honesty. She believed in forever. He took that from her. But what he couldn't take was her spirit. Every time a woman finds the courage to leave, every time a child learns what real love looks like, Emily lives on. That's her forever. The crowd wept with her, strangers and friends alike, their flames raised high against the dark. In the end, Emily's story was not just about betrayal or violence. It was about the resilience of truth, the unshakable bond of family, and the way a community can transform grief into change. She had entered the church on her wedding day believing she was walking into the beginning of her life. Hours later, she became the face of a tragedy. Yet through her parents, her foundation, and the people who carried her memory, she became something more, a symbol of hope, a warning of hidden dangers, and a testament to the power of love that refuses to be silenced. Charleston would always remember the bride who never made it past her wedding night, but it would also remember the light she left behind. And as candles flickered year after year, voices rose in unison, promising her story would never be forgotten. Emily Carter's forever had been stolen, but her legacy had become eternal.